it seems like you're running different businesses at this moment. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about your entrepreneurial story, how you ended up being entrepreneur, for how long you've been an entrepreneur?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a long time, 30 years since I started my first company. So 30 years as a startup CEO. Wow. And I just retired from my current company, Marrone Bioinnovations, July 31st. So I started my career with a big company, Monsanto, and I was an intrapreneur. They hired me to start up a new unit looking for new ways to control pests without the use of toxic chemicals, which interested me. But I did not do well in a big company. Well, I mean, I did well there, but I didn't do well in a big company. I just didn't like it because it took so long to get a decision made. So I bring up a new idea, and then it was a year or so before that something could be implemented from that idea, and that was an eternity because what I wanted to do with my life was to create products that could improve the sustainability of agriculture. So I got a call from a Danish company I had never heard of called Novo Nordisk, and they said, we're looking for someone to start up a new company somewhere in the country. We're thinking Davis, California, and we want you to discover and develop products for controlling pests as alternatives to toxic chemicals. And I said, wow, yeah, fine. Yeah, this is great. This is what I want to do. So I moved to California in 1990, and that was my first startup called Entotech. And Novo Nordisk was a corporate startup, so they gave me the money. But I built the building, hired all the people. It was an independent unit. And then they got into some trouble with their largest business of insulin and also enzymes at around 94, 95. So they sold us to our largest competitor, and I started up AgroQuest, which was doing the same thing, looking for ways to discover and develop natural products for controlling pests as alternatives to chemicals. And started up AgroQuest and raised $60 million in angel and venture capital.
Wow.
Was taking it public, unfortunately. Filed for the offering right around 9/11, 2001, right before that. August 3rd, 2001, filed with the SEC, and I was scheduled to fly to the World Financial Center and the World Trade Center, where the lawyers for the deal, for the bankers were in the South Towers. Unfortunately, that was September 12th. I was supposed to fly. That didn't happen. Yeah, so we canceled the, we were going to practice the road show. We canceled the deal. Are you still there?
Yeah, okay. Unfortunately.
Yeah, canceled the deal. And unfortunately, an investor took over the company and wiped out my founder's stock. That's a longer story about what to avoid if you're an entrepreneur. But then in 2006, I started up Marrone Bioinnovations. By the way, my old company AgroQuest was, after I left, a few years later, it was sold to Bayer Crop Science for almost $500 million. And I got a big fat zero from that sale of everything I built. So some lessons learned there, which I have applied to the Marrone Bioinnovations. So after almost 14 and a half years, I stepped down as CEO, and now I am advising 6 startups, 5 founded by women.
Wow.
And I'm also executive chairman of a company that's matching innovators to the marketplace for natural products and biological products in agriculture. Yeah. So I'm very busy. I'm also still consulting with my Marrone Bio, and also working for my largest shareholder, Osprey Ag Sciences, bringing him agbio deals. So I'm busier than ever. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that. May I ask, when you started out, entering the entrepreneurship field, did you know that it was called entrepreneurship? Like, did you study business? What was your background?
This is interesting because I have a PhD in entomology, which is the study of insects. So I was a scientist who, didn't really have. I did not have an MBA. Now, I did get very good training at Monsanto and Novo Nordisk in business, so I took as many business courses as I could, like 3 a year when I was there. But it was hard being a scientist entrepreneur. But I'm about, let's see, about an hour and a half from Silicon Valley. So I drove out there and took a boot camp with one of the very well-established lawyer firms, Wilson Sonsini, and they had a boot camp for entrepreneurs. So I spent a day and I learned everything about, well, everything.
Yeah,
you can't learn
I can
everything in
tell.
a day, but certainly the basics of how you start up a company.
Hmm.
And back then, this was because I'm so old. Back then, there was no internet way to find investors. So I had a big book. It's like maybe 3 to 4 inches thick, called the National Venture Capital Association list of all the venture capitalists in the United States, and then also a smaller version for the California venture capital. And I went page by page with my little yellow highlighter, looking for VCs that I thought could fund my company. And interestingly, one of the most venerable VCs in Silicon Valley, Don Valentine, took my call, and he said, "Well, we don't invest in ag biotech, but here's who does." And he referred me to the chairman of Calvert Social Ventures, which is one of the oldest, most venerable company fund that invests in socially responsible, minority-led, and women-led businesses. So I called him and said, "Don Valentine told me to call you," and he said, "Well, you're not even a year old yet in your business. So once you pass a year, come back and we have this competition, and you can pitch in front of our whole network of socially responsible investors." And that's how I got started. So it started with a cold
Wow.
call to a VC in Silicon Valley.
And then you did manage during that call and during that pitch to gather 60 million, right?
Well, the first, yes, over time. So but the first round was, let's see, it started up in '95, and we lived on friends and family money, and growers, our customers, and anybody we could get a few. We did a little convertible note where we would raise about $5,000 per individual,
Yeah.
and then raise 2 rounds of seed capital, which was probably about 450,000 or something.
Interesting.
And that got us off the ground. And that we were not pulling it. The founding team was not pulling any salary for
Yeah.
2 years or so, until we pitched to what was called the Social Venture Network, which is what Calvert referred us to, and that was in '97. And we'll see, around that time. And then Rockefeller and Company had a socially responsible investment fund, the Odyssey Fund, that became our lead investor at that round, and we raised close to $4 million in our first round in
Wow.
'97. Yeah, and so that's how it came out of that. Some of that cold calling I did. And then 60 million later, I did a round every year until we filed for the IPO in 2001. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
60 million. Yeah.
Well, what do you say to those who drop out of college or high school to start a business? Do you think this is kind of the right decision, or I should get a proper education and then get a decent work experience before jumping into the entrepreneurship?
I don't think so. Back then, I think it was harder for entrepreneurs, but today there's a lot of investment capital, and I think, and a lot of folks right out of school call me and say, I have this idea. You think I can start up a company? I said, yeah. I don't see any problem with somebody starting up a company right out of school, and I don't think you have to have a business degree. I think you have to surround yourself with good advisors and good mentors and good people. But if you there are so many problems to solve in this world, and I'm just in one part of it, which is the sustainable agriculture area, and ag and food. Just in that alone, there's so many problems to solve. You add on that, healthcare or energy, waste, whatever, and so we have a lot of problems to solve, or this planet's going to go to hell. So I think it's really a good time to be an entrepreneur, even with COVID-19. I started up the company. Let's see. Yeah, I started. I think that you can. It's always a good time to start up when you can start incubating a company when times are bad, and then have it already to talk to investors when times are a little bit better, like post COVID. Yeah, and investors are still investing right now. Yeah.
Of course, I mean, I visited Silicon Valley once, and I know that it's very flourishing, and it has a lot of, like the entrepreneurship ecosystem there is very strong, and I'm pretty sure that they are self-supporting and growing companies. But
there's also a lot of there's also a lot of incubators and accelerators today. They were not existent when I first started up my companies. So there's tons of accelerators and incubators for entrepreneurs to participate in and learn about entrepreneurship and meet investors and get a network and so forth. Yeah.
This is very interesting because see, when you do have too many options, you got confused, right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah. I do have. I'm advising some entrepreneurs that. There's so many.
Too much of incubation. Like which one I should join?
Too much.
Yeah.
That's right. I do see that. There's a lot of incubators, and one of them keeps applying and getting in, and at some point, you just gotta say no more. I just gotta spend. A lot of entrepreneurs misunderstand how long it's going to take to raise money. It takes 9 to 12 months and full time. And so if you're a founding CEO, that's your job. If you don't like that, then that's probably not be able to do it.
Yeah,
it's a sales process. You have it's not rocket science. I mean, you have a list of contacts. You assemble the contacts from your own research or referrals, and then you work those and you pitch. It's a sales process, and then when one drops out, you get another one in, and you have to. You get an investor when you have a big enough number of people you talk to. There's going to be because you have I'd say 1 out of 50 is going to give you money.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I've been in that process before, and I kind of understand. Being a researcher or scientist into an entrepreneur, what kind of characteristics did you have to change in your personality?
Good question, because I now advise a number of entrepreneurs. Some do have PhDs. If you sound like a scientist, you turn off. Already there's a prejudice against you if you have a PhD. So if you sound like a scientist and you talk too much technology, you turn off the investor. But if you sound like a business person and you can talk channels to market, you can talk what your market size is, who your competitors are. So you talk on the business side, especially the commercial side. That's what says, oh, this person's not just a scientist, but it was
business.
A lingo I had to learn. But because I worked for a big company and Monsanto, and I was very much exposed to the commercial side when I was there, I was able to suck up a lot of that business lingo, and I did take a lot of business courses. Yeah. So that helped me a lot.
Was it easy, or was it very challenging?
It was challenging. Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't hard, but it was challenging for others to accept me. So here's an example. So for Marrone Bio, my last company, I brought in somebody knowing that even though this was my third startup and successful entrepreneur, I still felt that the PhD was going to be a problem. So I brought in my first employee was Julie Morris, who had an MBA from Harvard, and a lot of the venture capitalists have MBAs from Harvard and Stanford. So, and she was from Agilent. She was from technology, not from agbio. But it was amusing because there'd be times when we'd go visit some of the VCs in Sand Hill Road, the classic Silicon Valley ones, and they would ignore me, even though I'm like a 3-time entrepreneur. And then they would only look at Julie, who just left Agilent, and start talking to her because she had the Harvard MBA. So that wounded my ego a lot, but I got over it.
Yeah.
Just talking, continuing to hone the message, and I do know the market. I did know the market. I mean, awesome. I knew the inside of the business, inside and out. So yeah.
And then now let's move to being an entrepreneur as a female, as a woman. How is it? Like, I'm sure you have a lot of story about that.
I do have a lot of stories around that. I tried not to give it a lot of thought, but what was interesting was so many times I was the only woman in the entire group pitching. So like I'd go to a venture fair, a pitch fest or whatever, and I was the only woman. And what was interesting about that was it made me stand out. So I was able to really stand out and attract venture capital because I was a woman. So there was positives there. I know you hear lots of, and it is difficult for a woman to raise money and get the credibility, but I found that it was actually very helpful to be often the only woman in the room. But the biggest problem that women have is that we have a narrower range of acceptable behaviors than men. So if you're too strong, you come across too strong. That's really important point. I mean, investors want to see strong entrepreneurs. But if you're too strong,
what do you mean with a strong? Strong in terms of knowledge, in terms of personality, or
opinion, like forcefulness of your opinions. Okay, so if you believe something strongly and you know you're right, somebody else doesn't think you're right, and you stand up for yourself, you're going to be labeled sometimes too strong. Yet a male CEO. Every male entrepreneur and male CEO I know is very strong and stands up for themselves and their opinions. So that's one of the biggest challenges. So what I would do is dial back. So I would be, maybe I'd having a discussion with somebody about, and I was disagreeing with what they were saying or their opinion, and I knew that that my way was going to be the way to do it. So I was trying to convince them, and then right in the middle of the conversation, they'll say, "Oh, why do you have to be so strong?" And that immediately makes you dial back and say, "Oh, am I offending you? I'm so sorry." And you apologize and you dial back, and then they get their way, and then I'll compromise, and then many times I've compromised on the course of action, knowing that wasn't the right course of action, and they had to see it for themselves. But that would set back the timeline, of the startup. And so I tell a lot of young women today is, you got to be yourself, and you will. You're going to be strong. So, and you're the one that's going to make it happen. You're the one that has the vision and the compassion for the business. So, you have to. You don't want to be offensive, obviously, and too aggressive. But at the same time, you can't compromise on the decisions that need to be made.
Yeah, of course. And then, do you agree on this quote, like that it says, different gender. Being successful in whatever startup you're running depend on being a male or female for specific industries like beauty
I'm sorry,
or
I didn't hear the
fashion.
first part of the question.
Yeah, I was asking, being a male or female, does it really matter in the success of the startup? Especially if it's in a specific industry like beauty, fashion, majority women, technology, majority men.
No, it really doesn't. And I'm in agriculture, and again, I'd go to typically I'd be the only woman in a room of all male farmers, and I might be the keynote speaker, or I'd be out on a farm and introducing them to our product, and what came out of my mouth was knowledge, because I knew what I'm talking about, and I became an expert and an industry expert in these biologicals, and so that credibility was built regardless of gender, and that took some time, but I don't think it matters. I think for our customers, and I think in most industries, if you know what you're talking about, you're generally going to be accepted. But I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm just saying that it is important to show that you can get credibility by showing what you know and your knowledge.
You're currently mentoring 60 startups that are run by women.
5 run by women.
Awesome. And how do you see that? Like, how do you feel like they're doing good? Like, I mean, they managing the stress, the pressure.
It's interesting because I have a full range of personalities, and I've learned what really makes a good entrepreneur or not by the ones that I have coached and mentored. And those who are quite good entrepreneurs are ones that get out there, they make it happen. No matter what rejection they get or negative criticism, and you'll hear a lot of it. They keep going, and what they do is they listen. So you have to have a filter for all that criticism and negativity, because everyone will tell you, oh, that's not going to work, and so you have to listen for patterns, pattern recognition. Okay, maybe you talk to 10 people, and 7 of them said the same thing about your pitch or your business, and gosh, maybe I do need to adjust a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so you look for patterns, and then constantly improve and adjust, and that's what the best entrepreneurs I'm coaching do. They're coachable. They listen, learn. I've had some that I've coached awesome. That have a hard time engendering confidence in those they talk to, and some of it's just personality. So maybe they just can't be CEO. But there's a lot of fiction, I would say, or dogma about that. You need to bring in like professional management, and these young founders can't do it. I do not believe that whatsoever. I think that the majority of the founders that I know definitely can take their business as far as they want to take it. Again, provided they listen, they adjust, they learn, and they have good people around them to mentor them. But I know there's a formula of a lot of VCs that will, exit out the founder, especially if they're from a technical background, and then bring in the professional management. I don't think that I think over time, I think a lot of the studies have shown that that's not always the best way, especially if the professional management is from large companies that have no idea about entrepreneurship and how to use resources in a skinny way and bootstrap.
Mm-hmm. And any of this is sort of the companies, even the company you founded, did you manage to be the M entrepreneur or the P entrepreneur, like a millionaire or billionaire?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that.
Yeah, I mean, did you manage in any of the startup that you mentored, or the startup that you managed to start your own self, to hit the M word as a millionaire or the B word as a billionaire?
I'm sorry, I still do.
Yeah. Did you manage to hit million or billion in whatever the startup that you're managing?
I'm sorry, I'm still not hearing it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I'm trying to say, did you hit the million or billion in the startup that you're working with?
Oh, okay, millions or billion. Okay, yeah. So we were in the hundreds of millions in valuation for the two companies. So I took this company, Marrone Bio, public in 2013, and both companies were in the several hundred million valuations. Yeah.
Wow. But you haven't touched it yet, the billion type of company.
Yeah. So this one, Marrone Bio, has the opportunity to be that. The products that we've developed are quite good and cutting edge, and there's the potential to do it. But as a public company, it's totally under pressure to get to break even and not burn more money. That's very different from tech, where you can, or like Palantir, where you can burn money forever, or Amazon. But we're at the point where I think once we get to break even and show that we're profitable, then I think the valuation is going to start upticking, and I don't think a billion is an unreasonable number. So my old company, AgriQuest, was sold to Bayer Crop Science for almost 500 million. So
wow.
Yeah.
And then what do you do usually? Do you go with a feedback, or do you usually follow your gut, your inner voice, when you're taking a decision regarding to startup or when whatever?
Yeah. Do I listen to feedback or go to my gut? You got to use both, because I found that I've been wrong using my gut when hiring. So people can be very charismatic in interviews, and narcissists and salespeople can get through the hiring process, and I'll fall in love with that person and say, oh, they're fantastic, and then find out, wow, that was just a veneer. So I use both. I think you have to use both your gut and feedback. But there's sometimes when the feedback is wrong and it's in conflict with your gut, and then in that case, I will go with my gut because my gut is based on years of experience.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and I'm a because I am a scientist, that has served me well because I'm data driven. So, what's interesting is I've met a lot of people, and they're particularly from large companies, and because they are from big companies, they rely on people they know and trust, and even if that person is wrong, okay, whereas I'm always relying on data first, and then I'll go to whether I trust that person. And so that has served me quite well. But I see a lot of people who I've hired from larger companies who then have a team of people that they completely trust, but that person has never done this before because we're a completely new business and a different startup. We're disruptive, and so it's very different from what they've done before. So why in the world would they know how to do what they're doing? They need some coaching and training and mentoring.
Of course.
And yet they're turned over, and because they're in the chosen circle of that manager, then they're just let to make these decisions that are wrong. And that's been an interesting battle. And I didn't realize until recently about the patterns that I've seen that when I use data to make decisions, it's often far better than just trusting someone you've known for a while.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then last question about communicating with investor or choosing an investor to invest in whatever the startup. Do you rely on how much money they're going to invest, or do you look at the side of personality? Are you going to work together with him or her? What is your thoughts about that?
Yeah, who you choose as your investors is the most important decision. Money is not just money, and it's what I've learned is that you really have to choose investors who share your values and are going to back you as the entrepreneur, and that's not easy to do because when someone's ready to give you a check, but they're the wrong investor. But I've taken money from the wrong investor, and wow, that's really harmed the business and me personally in terms of being able to make money from my businesses. So it's really important to be choosy. Now, how can you do that if you're up against the wall and you need to make payroll? Well, that's the problem. So you never know when a disaster is going to happen. Oh, let's see. 9/11, 2001, 2008 meltdown, COVID-19. So what I've learned is that something bad can always happen. So you have to prepare for those disasters and make sure you're never up against a wall with having to take any deal. And that's what I did after 9/11. I took a deal with terms that gave the investor a full ratchet. What that means is that if a future round of financing is at a lower price than your previous round, then the previous round ratchets down to that price. Well, okay, here's an example from AgriQuest. So it was $1.38 where I did the last round, and then an investor, because after 9/11, none of all the wallets closed. There was nobody wanted to give us any money, and we still had a high burn rate. We had built up to go public. We weren't profitable yet. Someone offered 6.7 cents a share. So it was $1.38 cents a share, and an investor offered 6.8 cents a share. Okay, so the board took that deal, and that there was a full ratchet on that $1.38, which I should never have taken. And the same investor so engineered the lower price so that every round except the seed round ratcheted down. So we went to that 6.7 price. So we went from 30 million shares outstanding to almost 1 billion shares outstanding. So imagine if I own 5% of the company, what that dilution will do for you. So it went down to where I went from 7% of the company to 0.00001% of the company, and wiped out my founder stock. So that's an example of why you should be very careful about what investors money you should take.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for that. I'm sure you will have questions for me too, right? Do you have any questions for me? Do you want to ask me
Well,
something?
tell me about in your interviews, what patterns are you seeing?
Partners in terms of
entrepreneurs and investors and what entrepreneurs are telling you.
it's a very much the same issues. Starting out, too many options like with incubations, accelerator, like how to choose, how to seek investor, how much money should I ask, how can I value my company, how can I get my first client. I mean, it's very much the same, whether they base in the U.S., whether they live in Europe, whether they are in Africa or Asia. It's very much the same.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I've been to meetings with lots of entrepreneurs in Singapore and Europe and wherever, and it's pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Same issues. Same issues. Some places are a little harder to raise money, but there's pockets of money forming around now, all around the world for startups. Yeah.
I'm based in Cairo, Egypt, and I run 2 startups before. And I've seen people, like I've never seen a startup from the MENA region or the North Africa region that has a potential to go and has branches in Europe and the US. You see what I mean? It's always the other way around. It's always like startup coming from Europe and the US into the North Africa region.
That's true.
Like Uber, like because something, of course, there's something missing. Like there's something that we need to take care of so that we be able to compete in the international market. Until this point, we have no idea what is the missing part.
Yeah, until this point, that's true. What is the missing part?
Unfortunately, I have no idea. Because we do have investments. Not a bad technology, not the best, but it's still good enough. Ideas are somehow not flourishing, not the best, but it could be something that could be scalable. We can take it to the next level, but we haven't done that yet.
Well, there's certainly potential, certainly in food and ag. I mean, gosh, there's so many problems to solve it where you are.
I was working in agriculture in Cairo, Egypt, by the way. I was working in Mercy Corp, Egypt. I was mentoring agricultural entrepreneurs, those who have agricultural businesses. I was mentoring them, delivering training to them, business training. I wasn't into technical because I had no idea about technical stuff. But I was just doing the business side. So I can tell you that in agriculture field, in North Africa and in Africa in general as a continent, there's a huge opportunities out there.
Oh my God, incredible opportunity. Yeah.
The only challenge for you to discover those opportunities that there is no proper channel communication with trusted sources, entrepreneurs, or a group of community leaders. True.
You know, that's a good point, because all of these entities that are forming pockets, like there's Future Food Asia, and there's now a whole group of in my world of food and ag tech in Asian region, but no one's brought it to Africa yet. That same model, and I need to suggest that, because there's no lack of entrepreneurial talent and desire, really, to do that.
It's a lack of communication,
and still so many big problems to solve. And, yeah, just matching farmers to the market and using technology for some of the basic things, information, and measuring yields and better pest management. There's so many things. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I can make an introduction if you're interested.
Yeah.
Of course. Thanks so much. I truly appreciate your time, and hopefully you did enjoy it too.
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
It. Yeah, and once this is published, you're going to send them over to you. I'm going to share with all my network. And if there's someone is interested in what you do, maybe get advice from you as a female entrepreneur, can she communicate to you by LinkedIn?
Sure, absolutely. I do it all the time. my first bit of advice is always free.
Awesome. Yeah,
and
of
I'm,
course,
and I'm
of course.
liberal and free with my advice
Absolutely.
to entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, and please enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.